Hello everyone, and welcome back to Occult Perspectives. So I just recently posted a music cover, a drum cover of Free Will by Rush. That was really fun, learning that song. I used to do that a lot, especially with Rush songs. I would learn like a whole album. If you're familiar with the band, the albums Moving Pictures and Fly By Night and 2112, I pretty much learned all the material on those albums at one point. I had all the fills memorized. So I've been a Rush fan for a really long time. So keeping up with my drum skills, even though I'm not actively playing in a band right now, is really beneficial for me. It's a really good way to transmute a lot of energy into something productive. So if there's a cover of a song, if there's a song you guys would like me to cover, I might be willing to learn that on drums. So if there's any songs you really like and you'd like to see me cover them on the drum set, go ahead and comment in the comment section, and comments are always welcome. So as long as they're good comments, you're either asking a question, you're getting engaged in the conversation. I've had a lot of weird comments, of course, but that's to be expected with this kind of YouTube channel. Moving on from the music, before we get started with the subject of today's video, the music that you are hearing in the background, let me see. This music is, sometimes my controller comes undone. I'm playing this on an Xbox, just on the YouTube app. 963 Hertz crown chakra activation meditation. Awaken to your, and it's not giving me the full, awaken to your highest nature. And it actually has a picture of like Thoth, or somebody that looks like Thoth, like an Egyptian adept, and there's a pyramid in the background. So it's actually a really cool, even just the visualization for the meditation video is really cool. So just wanted to throw that out there. If you are new to this YouTube channel, which I expect most of you are, you're returning to my channel. You've already watched my content before, but just a brief overview of what I do on here is we cover different esoteric research subjects, such as Freemasonry, Kabbalah, the Tree of Death, the Tree of Life, many other things, alchemy, ceremonial magic, all of these sorts of things, all of these esoteric subjects we talk about on here, and try to extract things from the teachings and then use those to benefit our lives in a practical way. And magic is a really powerful force. So the more you come to an understanding of yourself, the more you work with learning to calm the body and relax the nervous system to be able to get into that meditative state. That's really prerequisite before doing any kind of energy work or anything like that. If you're new to magic, I would say work on meditation for a long time, just meditation alone. Learning how to discipline the mind and kind of quiet the mind and get rid of distractions and all those sorts of things. Allow your body to actually relax so that it can get into a state where it's just not, your work is not being disturbed by any outside forces. So that's just in short, that's what this YouTube channel is about. I also have a Patreon as well, where I have audio clip recordings of me reading from my book, Freemasonry and Ceremonial High Magic. If you want access to all the chapters, you will have to get the $10 tier. There's only one additional chapter on the $10 tier as of now, and that is chapter 8, the Master Mason degree. And I need to really get busy on that and add more stuff to that. And then for $5, so for $10 you get access to the whole book, and then for $5 you get everything except for the newest chapter, the Master Mason chapter. So you may just want to do the $5 one and wait till later until I have more material in the $10 tier. That is totally up to you. So what that book is about is it's about the connection between, ceremonial magic, ancient cultures, all these things, Egypt, Sumeria, and the practices of Freemasonry and what is the connection between them. You know, because a lot of people, they write books on Freemasonry, there's books on ceremonial magic, but there's not very many books tying these two things together. And I give about as much information in there as I'm allowed to give, you know, without you actually going through the ceremonies yourself, you know, becoming a Mason or whatever, or going into a mystery school, or, you know, going through the ritual yourself. There are certain things. To really know what it's like to be initiated is one thing, to read about it is another. But I do try to take you into that world as much as possible. I do have available a service. If you want to, my email, I will leave that in the description. I can do phone calls and we talk about any spiritual topics that you want to. If I don't know the answer to them, I will direct you, you know, to the answer, or source of material that would be beneficial to you. And we can just talk about whatever. We can talk about spirituality, topics you might want to know more about, maybe some self, you know, how to integrate the self a little bit more, how to process some things. So phone calls, I would do 30 minutes for $50, and then you save money if we would just do an hour phone call, which would be $75. I haven't had any of those yet, but that is something that I, you know, will start doing if I do get the demand for it. Also, tarot readings. I haven't done tarot readings in a long time, but if you do want that done, you know, just email me, and I'll put my email in the description. Sometimes email gets sent to the junk box though, or I guess the junk inbox. So if I don't respond back, let me know, and the emails may, you know, they might have gotten lost in there, so to speak. Other than that, I think that pretty much wraps up everything so far. So thank you to all the patrons so far. Thank you, Heidi. You are the newest patron, and you actually you're on the $10 tier. So thank you for becoming a member. That really means a lot. To all of you who either have been patrons or are currently patrons on the Patreon, thank you very, very much for your continued support. You know, even just $5 goes a long way. That's my cup of coffee for the day. So, as I am drinking my morning cup of coffee right now, my first cup. I'm typically a pretty slow drinker when it comes to coffee, so it takes me a little while to finish that first cup. All right, so enough of my rambling. I think I've rambled on long enough, because I feel like this video is going to go on for quite a while. Anyway, the topic of this video is going to be about this book, The Masonic Magician, and it's about the life of Count Cagliostro. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Cagliostro or Cagliostro? Maybe it's Cagliostro. I've heard a couple different people pronounce it some different ways. But what this book is about is it's about his life and death. He has a very interesting life. This dude was a very interesting Mason. He created his own Egyptian rite. So it was degrees which are additional to the first three original degrees of, you know, craft masonry or Blue Lodge masonry, which is the entered apprentice, fellow craft, and the master mason. And we'll be getting into the degree structure of that in just a little bit of his Egyptian Freemasonry. There's so much to cover about this character. He's a very interesting guy. So if you are into Freemasonry at all, if you like to study those sorts of things, or even if you're just into Egyptian spirituality, or if you're into ceremonial magic, you know, archangels and that sort of thing, you probably definitely maybe want to get a copy of this book, The Masonic Magician. The author is Philippa Fawkes and Robert L.D. Cooper. And Robert L.D. Cooper is he's a Scottish Freemason and curator of the Grand Lodge of Scotland Museum and Library in Edinburgh. He's the keeper of the oldest lodge records in the world. That's super cool. dating from 1599. That's before modern Freemasonry was even said to have started. That was more like 1717, right in that time frame. He writes and broadcasts on all aspects of Freemasonry and has lectured on the topic throughout the world. He is the author of many books, including The Rosslyn Hoax and Cracking the Freemasons' Code. So yeah, even if you're not a Mason, there are so many books out there, and really all the esoteric information you could want is kind of already out there, for the most part. I think that my book, Freemasonry and Ceremonial Magic, covers a really unique niche, or niche, however you say that hasn't quite been occupied yet by any authors. It's going to be a very interesting piece of work that kind of culminates and brings together a lot of different influences. So I did want to mention real quick, this is just a side note, I was able to catch Universal Mastery on a couple of his live streams on his YouTube channel, and that was really cool. So he's always really courteous and really kind. So, you know, just giving a shout out to Universal Master YouTube channel. There's so many good channels out there, guys. Like, you know, there is a solid spiritual community, I think, of people from different spiritual backgrounds, you know, going into different things. I could give a whole list of shout outs, you know, in this video if I wanted to. If I had all the channels written down, there's so many of them. Curtis Joseph is good if you want, you know, more left-hand path-oriented stuff too. Spectre Ball, S-P-E-K-T-O-R, Spectre Ball, B-A-A-L. He's got a really interesting YouTube channel as well. There's a whole bunch of them out there, so make sure you're checking out other YouTube channels and stuff as well. So let's go ahead and get into it. The Masonic Magician. I believe Wikipedia or somewhere on Google it said he was born in Palermo, Sicily, born June 2nd, 1743, and it looks like he lived till 1795. So that's really not that long of a time period. He was imprisoned at some point, because even though this was like the Age of Enlightenment when he was around, the church was still really powerful, and they could still exercise their influence over people, and yeah, it was basically messed up. We all know about the corruption of the church, and especially throughout history, and how they just persecuted so many enlightened souls, so many beings that were really trying to bring truth to humanity, and it's really just unfortunate. I'm glad we're past that point in society. We still deal with a lot of intolerance, but for the most part, people can have their religious beliefs, you know, that they want to have, and that's a beautiful thing. At least in this country, you know, you're free to believe in whatever spiritual practice, you know, it is that you want to, and that's really, any nation that's going to succeed, you know, needs to let people have that amount of freedom. You know, their religious, their spiritual stuff, you know, everyone has their own thing, and just leave them to it, as long as nobody's like going out and causing havoc or, you know, killing people. You know, that's, we want peace. So yeah, there's a lot of mystery regarding Cagliostro's like where he was born, who his parents are. There's many different accounts, many different stories. He was born in the Progressive Enlightenment era of the 1700s. He produced Masonic degrees whereby the candidate could become quote-unquote perfected. And the degrees are very hermetic in nature. So it's all about hermetics and alchemy. And alchemy is always externally or exoterically understood as like transmuting like base metals into gold. It's all about like physical components. But the deeper spiritual significance is really working on those components within the self. Really bringing the self into its own perfection, aligning yourself with your true will or your higher will, which really only comes through really knowing yourself and not just trying to bypass or escape this realm. I see that a lot on the right-hand path. I don't even really like using terms like right-hand path or left-hand path, but a lot of like light workers or people who are trying to just transcend and get out of this like hellish realm. I get where you're coming from, because I used to be the same way in a sense, but at the same time, there's a lot we're here to experience this world right now, so we don't want to get caught up in this escapism, kind of thing, or this thing where we're trying to bypass all these experiences which are actually necessary for our development and growth. So we're not just meant to really become these beings of light just yet and transcend. And even, you know, even when you do transcend and you get to those higher realms, it's just there's another graduation process again at that level. So you're really just starting out as the runt again, in a sense. So you're climbing the ladder again. So I don't feel like there's really a rush in the spiritual type of stuff. For me personally, I've experienced a lot of catalysts in this life, a lot of catalysts, which has made me die and be reborn, you know, of course, symbolically, many, many, many times. And in a way, even though it's not literal, it does become real. What is real to you, and, you know, what you experience, even internally, that nobody else around you may be aware of, is very important to your evolution process. If you were experiencing it, if you experienced it even in a mental way, you still experienced it. It's still valid. It still is a part of you. It plays a role in helping you to understand, you know, who you are, who you really are, and where you're going, etc. All of these things. Okay, so he was also arrested, Cagliostro. Cagliostro was arrested in 1789. That was part of the Inquisition. A lot of you have probably heard about that in history. That's where they started, you know, like arresting the church started arresting a whole bunch of heretics, blah, 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 had them like executed or imprison them, or just all kinds of awful things. So, yeah. A lot of people think that he is a charlatan, or he's kind of like this counterfeit guy. He was kind of a dupe. He wasn't like a real... There's even a lot of Masons that think that Cagliostro is just kind of this... he just wasn't genuine. And the more I read about him, the more I don't think that's the case. I think he was legit. He was a little bit self-absorbed, and he definitely had views which went directly against the church, and he wasn't always quiet about it either. So that made him a really easy target. And I think a lot of people were just jealous of him. There's no way that somebody could have this kind of wisdom and this kind of understanding and make friends with people in such high places, even popes and stuff. Like, there were popes who even, you know, the ones who weren't such assholes, they actually acknowledged and recognized that he did have real healing powers. He did have real spiritual abilities, and was able to heal people, and was able to produce the Philosopher's Stone. And some say that he even had the Elixir of Life, which like grants immortality. So maybe Eliphas Levi is still alive today in one form or another. So, but let's continue, because we've got a lot to cover, and I'm only, of course, going to be able to cover so much in this video. Like I said, I recommend buying the book because there's so much information in here. I went back and read section 3 of the book first. I read the first couple pages of the first chapter, which is about his life. Let me see, how does this have this split up? So part 1 of the book is the life and times of Cagliostro. It's telling you all about his life and the details of that. Part 2 of the book's actually the origins and history of Freemasonry. I have not gotten to that part yet. And then part 3 is Cagliostro's Egyptian Freemasonry. It's actually the rituals and then the commentary on top of that. And I pretty much skipped straight to part 3. I read a little bit about his early life, and then I skipped to part 3 of the book, read about the Egyptian Freemasonry, and I do want to talk about that in the book. So I'm going to try to get through some of his earlier life stuff as quick as I can. I know there's a really good book, I'm sorry, not book, there's a really good video about Cagliostro on YouTube. I think it is, I'm trying to remember the name of the YouTube channel, but if you type in Cagliostro, it should be one of the first videos that pop up, and it is, give me just a moment. I know I keep getting sidetracked. That is definitely one of my one of my shortcomings maybe when it comes to creating videos. But I also just try to kind of create like a relaxed atmosphere, so these videos are never super formal. You know, I try to be, you know, as professional as I can be. But at the same time, you know, I'm just trying to relax with you guys, and we're all learning stuff together and just trying to enjoy it, you know. I don't make any money from YouTube videos. I don't, not yet. I don't have the required watch hours, but I do make some money from Patreon, you know, thanks to my patrons who support me. And I'm really grateful for that. I really am. Here's the video. The YouTube channel is called Universal Co-Masonry. They have some really interesting videos on there, but they have a video called Episode 22, Cagliostro and Egyptian Freemasonry. It's like an hour and 12 minutes long. There's I believe it's two Masonic brothers, and they're having, you know, discussion and such. And it's a really good video, put together really well. The guys are both really well-spoken guys, a lot better than me, a lot more professional. So yeah, definitely check that out. Okay, back to Cagliostro's early life. It says here, according to his own memoirs, Cagliostro admitted that he knew neither the name of his parents nor the place of his birth. He states quite emphatically, "I do not know the place where I was born, nor the parents who gave me birth. Different circumstances in my life have aroused in me doubts and suspicions which the reader may share, but I repeat that all my researches in this respect have resulted only in giving me, it is true, but great but vague and uncertain ideas as to my birth. My tutor always told me that I was left an orphan at the age of 3 months and that my parents were noble and Christians, but he kept the most absolute secrecy as to their name and the place of my birth." So that's very interesting in and of itself. Some words spoken at random have made me suspect that I was born at Malta, but this is a matter which it has always been impossible to verify. Okay, I'm just gonna read through some of these notes real quick, because I wrote notes from the kind of the prologue. What is this? Introduction. The introduction in the book. There's a bit about there in his spiritual mission and abilities. We talked about his spiritual abilities a little bit. His mission was essentially to allow mankind to become more than human, become divine. He had the tools and the knowledge set for people to become more than human, essentially ascend in a way and become, you know, regents on earth through inner work and through inner alchemy, not just like titles being given, if that makes sense. And you had to go through years of, you know, training and working with different spiritual practices and all these things before you could get to that stage. We'll talk about that later. He was accused of being Balsamo, but he says it. Yeah, I don't know much about this Balsamo guy. I haven't really gone into detail about that, but there's a lot of people who think that Cagliostro is Balsamo, which apparently was some kind of con man or something like that. Some people say they're one and the same. Some people say they're different people. Many Masons don't like him. Manly P. Hall has sympathetic views towards Cagliostro. Any of the more, like, I would say, esoterically inclined Masons, or those who, you know, study the occult and stuff like that, they are going to be a lot more sympathetic to Cagliostro, of course. The Egyptian rite actually comes from a French manuscript. They were definitely potential heresies to the church. The Pope actually at one point made Masonic, or one of the emperors, it was some kind of, one of the rulers of one of the countries, they actually made Masonic allegiance was turned into a sin. And that wasn't really that long ago in history. I mean, we're talking like mid 1700s, late 1700s. That was only like 300 years ago when the church had like still had this much power. And, you know, it's crazy to me. It's crazy. Secret societies were forming to quote unquote bring down the church. We know about the Bavarian Illuminati, all of these sorts of things. They just wanted to end the corruption. They didn't really want to destroy the churches. They just wanted a more genuine spirituality. Inquisition. The Inquisition actually still exists today, which I thought that was really weird. It's just changed its name over time. Here we go. The Inquisition was probably one of the most dangerous and creative inventors of torture to have ever been assembled in the name of religious justice. First established in 1184, it was effectively a tribunal or institution that would stand as judge in the case of heresy against the Catholic Church. The main weapon would be to employ torture, which was deemed a legitimate means of extracting confessions, names, or other information from those arrested on suspicion of heresy. The extraction of information was enforced by jailers, officially only carried out for 15 minutes at a time, and supposedly under the supervision of a doctor. The methods used were barbaric and intensely painful, often leading to premature death before the victim had achieved a trial. In 1542, the Roman Inquisition was established by Pope Paul III with the title of Congregation of the Holy Office and flourished until the mid-1800s. So get this, in 1908, the Holy Office of the Inquisition changed its name to the Sacred Congregation of the Holy Church, and then it changed its name again in 1965 to the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, which it is called to this day. So basically, bullshit. It's all bullshit. The Pope has no authority. Every person has the same divine spark that some Pope has. He's not the intermediate between God and the rest of the people. I think that's the most insane, ludicrous view, but to each their own, I suppose. Inquisition has simply changed its name. All Cagliostro's belongings were burnt. You know, it's the same story as like that Library of Alexandria. You know, it's just ridiculous. All this destruction of knowledge and really just beautiful things. Like they burnt his books, his Masonic regalia, his manuscript of Egyptian Freemasonry was burnt before a large crowd in the Piazza della Minerva, which sounds like kind of just a public space where people could see it. Yeah, ignorance still pervades very much so today, but it was really bad back then. Sad too that, over the centuries, Freemasons have repeatedly been attacked by others, not just the Catholic Church. How many people are aware that during World War II, about 80,000 Freemasons perished under the persecution of Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini? Yeah, those were just ignorance, man. It's really what it comes down to. Okay. Oh yeah, I'm also wearing this. I don't ever wear this shirt. I think I wore this shirt for like a gig that I played, a show that I played, like probably two years ago or so. I don't wear this shirt though, but I decided to put it on. It's got all this Egyptian hieroglyphics on it, the all-seeing eye. I don't know if this is the Eye of Horus or the Eye of Ra. I get those two mixed up because they're so similar. But I love this shirt. It's really cool. But yeah, it just doesn't come out that much to be worn. So some accounts, interestingly enough, say that Cagliostro's father was actually a prince. Let's go ahead and let's see. There are many people who are potential candidates for his father, but none of which have ever been proven. There was a newspaper at the time, evidence from the memorial or brief for the Count Cagliostro that a newspaper of the time, the highly regarded Courier de la Europe, I'm totally butchering the pronunciation of that, stated authoritatively that Cagliostro's parentage was that of the prince, and presumably the princess of Trebizond. So he had like a mentor, and anytime he would bring that subject up to his mentor, it was usually like dismissed, or he just wouldn't say too much about it. So there is a high possibility that he comes from royalty. Let's read about this a little bit. Cagliostro leaves the public in perfect darkness about his birth and parents, hence so many conjectures are made. One of them, determined at all events to give a father at least to the combe, has fixed upon the late Grand Master of Malta, Pinto. So there's a Grand Master of Malta, and some people think that that is his father. He gravely tells the world that a Maltese galley captured about 37 years ago a Turkish pleasure boat with several young ladies of the first distinction on board. One of them exchanged hearts with the Grand Master, who by his holy vow of celibacy could make of his fair capture anything but a lawful wife. Some little time after, the Grand Signor, whatever that is, Signor, by the interposition of the French court, obtained that the ladies should be returned to their disconsolate parents. They all set off together, not even the Grand Mistress excepted. The latter could not easily conceal her shame. She was now brought to the bed, gave birth of a boy. Her father, enraged at this, though a very common accident would have destroyed the fruit of his daughter's unlawful amour, but she found means to have the child put in a place of safety and soon after died by poison or a broken heart. So there's this boat of some kind of very, very, even by today's standards, I guess that could be considered, what's the word? Scandalous? Scandalous. So he is on this Grand Master was on this Turkish pleasure boat, whatever that means, with a bunch of young ladies. So it sounds like he slept with one of them, and then she wasn't supposed to get pregnant. Sure, her dad was really upset, so to conceal the shame of that, they, sent the child off, and then she died. The mother died. So that's one account. That's one possible thing to take into account. I'm trying to skip through this real quick. Look upon the only criterion of the imperial family of the Comnens had long reigned independently over the Christian empire of Trebizond, but by process of time they became a tributary to the Turks. From that source, Cagliostro derives his origin. This is now proved beyond any dispute. He was born in the capital of that empire and is acknowledged to be the only surviving son of the prince, who about 35 years ago swayed the precarious scepter of Trebizond. At that period when Comte Cagliostro was in or near the third year of his age, a revolution took place. The reigning prince, his father, was massacred by the seditious, and himself, by some trusty friend to the weaker party, carried to Medina, where the sheriff, the sheriff, sounds really similar to sheriff. Like sheriff just has one extra letter, I think. But the sheriff is actually like he's the leader of, actually it's really interesting. It means noble or highborn, the sheriff or sheriff. It's a descendant of Muhammad via his daughter Fatima. So they claim descent from Muhammad himself. Very interesting. The sheriff had the unprejudiced generosity to have him brought up in the religion of his Christian parents. Whether Comte Cagliostro has thought proper from political reasons to remain as it were in a cloud, or actuated by the spirit of a becoming pride has disdained to gratify the curiosity of a nation, where he has been treated with so much indignity, certain it is that his high descent is no longer contested, but even circumstantially proved in his memorial, wherein he recites that the black slave in his service told him of all things to beware of the city of Trebizond, and predicted the misfortunes that were to befall him after his departure from Mecca. Interesting. So there was a slave, apparently, or something, that kept warning him about that place, as if he knew. For the early part of his life, Cagliostro relates that he was brought up in the home of the Mufti. So the Mufti was a scholar who is an interpreter or expounder of Islamic law. In the ancient city of Medina, Cagliostro's given name was Akharat, Akharat, and was attended by 4 persons, a tutor aged from 55 to 60 years named Althotas, and 3 servants, 1 white who served me as valet, and 2 blacks, of whom one or other was with me day and night. Althotas, whose name it is impossible for me to pronounce without emotion, had for me the care and affection of a father. So this was basically like his tutor, essentially, that helped him learn all these esoteric things. He was into alchemy and all of these sorts of things, kind of like his Jedi master, in a way, if you want to look at it from like that kind of standpoint. It was a pleasure for him to cultivate the tendencies for the science which I showed. I can say that he possessed them all, from the most abstract to that of ornaments of dress. Botany, physics, and medicine were those in which I made the most progress. He taught Akharat, or Cagliostro, about the mysteries. So yeah, really, there is a lot of interesting things about, if you go through this book, it's just going to take too much time. He traveled with this guy, Althotas. They set off on journeys together, and Cagliostro, they had to split up at one point. I think he died or something, the mentor. But they travel everywhere. They go to Mecca, they go to Egypt, Asia, and Africa, they go to Rome. And Cagliostro just keeps going from place to place, and he's traveling, and he's spreading his ideas of, taking Freemasonry to the next level with the Egyptian Freemasonry, and showing people his miracles, making friends with friends in high places. So he's usually taken care of in one way or another. But in the process of his travels, he's healing the sick. He's doing all kinds of beneficial things to, help the society in some way. So he pretty much gave his life to service of humanity, from the way that I see it. Anyone who dedicates their entire lives to the mysteries or to learning these things, that's quite a feat, To not be able to not get caught up in just the mundane, everyday sorts of things, the distractions, the many distractions that life can bring. So let's see. So Althotas was this guy, or however you say it, was his caretaker, his mentor, and he meant a lot to Cagliostro. Taught him the mysteries, and every great initiate does need a mentor to some degree. Hermes is also mentioned. Althotas and Cagliostro took off on their travels when Cagliostro was only 12. He was only 12 years old when he started traveling the world and learning, different information from different cultures, different mystery school traditions. This was around 1760. The first destination was Mecca. In the palace, they were welcomed as honored guests of the Sharif, the noble or highborn who was descended from Muhammad. This is very much reminiscent. Cagliostro and his story reminds me a lot of Madame Blavatsky, how she dedicated her whole life to the spiritual pursuit and traveled, all around and everything, different places, really all around the world, and learned different, mystery school traditions and, different spiritual teachings, and was able to kind of culminate and bring them all together in theosophy. Cagliostro's mission is very similar to that, but this was earlier in history than Madame Blavatsky. So Blavatsky would have obviously known about Cagliostro, that's for sure. So yeah, that kind of gives you an idea, of his early life a little bit. He was either the son of the Grand Master of Malta, or he was the son of a prince. Those are two theories. Yeah, there were some really interesting sections that I read in here, especially about him, like healing people. I don't know if I'll be able to find like some really interesting sections or not. There were some that were really weird. Like he had a magic mirror, and he had this. Let me see. Here it is. He carried with him this little magic mirror. After discussing the question of sorcery, Cagliostro presented her with a leather case. Now, this is later on in the history. This is like... it doesn't have a year for this, but I'm not... This was like during his travels and all that stuff. After discussing the question of sorcery, Cagliostro presented her with a leather case. Her being Madame du Barry. She was really excited to meet Cagliostro at first, until it took this turn. Presented her with a leather case that he took from the breast pocket of his coat. He explained that it contained a magic mirror and that within she may see events from the past and future. He boldly hastened to add that, if the vision be not to your liking, do not blame me. You use the mirror at your own risk. Madame du Barry proceeded to open the case, and inside found a metallic glass in an ebony frame ornamented with a variety of magical characters in gold and silver. The Count recited some Kabbalistic words and asked her to gaze into the mirror. As commanded, she obeyed, and after a few moments fainted clean away. This was recorded in her memoirs, but she gave no clue as to what she had witnessed in the glass. So what can we conclude from this? The Grand Cop, that's the title that Cagliostro takes in his Egyptian Freemasonry. He's like, quote-unquote, the Grand Master of this new branch of Masonry. And he's called the Grand Cop. I think that's how you say it, the Grand Cop, or the Grand Cope. The Grand Cop is C-O-P-H-T. Obviously did his job well, in as much that Madame du Barry certainly received a visitation in the mirror, but not one to her liking. Perhaps she saw a visitation of her own demise. Her head upon the block of the guillotine, and then held aloft by its blonde hair for public execration? ? The magic mirror has held many a vision over the century, whether in its glass form or as ink held in the palm of the hands as practiced by the ancient Egyptians. Whatever the case, it seemed to have had a rather definite effect on the aging madam, for she further writes that she refused to see Cagliostro under any circumstances after that fateful day. So I thought that was a really interesting passage. He made predictions all the time, which actually came true. He was a psychic. He was a medium. He could predict things using kind of this ceremonial and Kabbalistic, different operations. There's a whole thing in here about him turning quicksilver into actual silver. He did it in the Masonic Lodge. I'm not going to read through that because that just takes you through this long process of how to do it, and yeah, it's just, we'll skip that for now. It was interesting, there were 3 noblemen who tried to basically show that he was a fake, and where was that at? According to one account, Cagliostro was before an audience of illustrious people, and 3 beggars were presented to him, asking for a cure to their respective ailments. One was deaf, another blind, and the third suffering from a terrible skin condition. The Count blessed them and urged them on their way, assuring them of their cure, at which point the 3, quote, beggars burst into laughter and threw back their hoods, to reveal themselves as the young noblemen who had set out to humiliate Cagliostro. The crowd began to jeer at Cagliostro, to which he responded solemnly, declaring that, if you are not deserving of what I give you, I can take it back. At that moment, the 3 young men began to panic and cry out, for one had become deaf, the other became blind, and the third afflicted by painful skin lesions. A lesson learned, and one that Cagliostro apparently felt was just, for he forgave them and restored them to their former health. So he made them sick when they pretended to be sick. That, because they wanted to set him up. That's an interesting account too. I thought that was really interesting. It was said that after the spectacle, no one doubted the healing powers of Count Cagliostro. Yep. And there's a couple different really interesting, stories in here. They would often use to predict things during psychic workings. In the rituals, they would use. Here we go. The Count was considerably accurate in his predictions, sometimes extremely so. He also did seances. They did a lot of seances back in like the 1700s. Like that was a big thing. Like there were actually a lot of people excuse me. That coffee's getting me. There were a lot of people who were into spirituality at that time. Seances were going on. Like they were, especially like the really rich and stuff and like noble people, they were really into alchemy and like trying to figure out all of these things. So totally very interesting. They didn't teach us that shit in high school, that's for sure. They skipped over all the interesting things in history and only gave us the most watered down version that they could, I feel like. His mystical seances involved the use of a dove, which is a young boy or girl, to act as the scryer, or the seer. This was exceptionally common, doves, as they were called, having been employed by magicians for centuries. The young person being in a state of virgin innocence that was believed to afford pure communication with the spirit realm. These children would be trusted with the power to command the 7 spirits that surround the divine throne and in turn preside over the 7 planets. So they're talking about the 7 archangels and the 7 planets. All of you should be very familiar with that if you follow my channel. The boy or girl would then kneel in front of a globe of clear water, which was placed on a table covered with a black cloth. Another method would be to use a vase filled with water and oil floated on the surface. Concentration on the liquid would invariably lead to a state of partial or complete hypnosis, and their clairvoyant abilities would manifest. Cagliostro would make strange mesmeric passes and summon the angels to enter the receptacle, whereby the dove would observe the visions and describe events taking place at the time or ones that would soon come to pass. On occasion, he would use a crystal sphere instead of the water globe or vase, and more rarely, a metallic mirror, which he carried with him. And we just talked about some of the powers of the magic mirror just a minute ago. I'm just kind of flipping through these pages and seeing if there's, before I get to the actual Egyptian rite itself, going back over these chapters and seeing if there's anything really. He received a visit from Saint Germain, so Cagliostro was in communication with Saint Germain as well. He knew Mozart, so they were in lodges together. A lot of interesting things. Like this guy's life, it's a whole study in and of itself. He's a very interesting character. So yeah, he was known for his like miracle workings, his healing, his ability to, work with alchemy really well. He was known for this stuff, heavily by like the royalty and things of that nature at the time. So, yep, and it's, even though I skipped to part 3 of this book, I'm so glad I'm going back into his actual life account and reading, reading about his stories and things that actually happened to him. It's really interesting stuff. It's definitely, this book is really worth a read if you're into Masonry. I highly recommend it. Or even just ceremonial magic in general. All right, Egyptian Freemasonry. Page 174. I do like this quote from Cagliostro. "I am not of any time or of any place. Beyond time and space, my spiritual being lives an eternal existence. I turn my thoughts back over the ages, and I project my spirit towards an existence far beyond what you perceive. I become what I choose to be, participating consciously in the absolute being. I arrange my actions according to what is at hand. My name defines my actions because I am free. My country is wherever my feet stand, and wherever my feet stand at the moment. Put yesterday behind you if you dare, like the forgotten ancestors who came before you. Give no thought to the morrow and the illusionary hope of greatness will never be yours. I will be what I am. Interesting. So, according to the Inquisition, Cagliostro got the idea for his Egyptian ritual from a booklet supposedly found in a London bookshop. The text was reputed to have been written by a man called George Coston, an obscure spiritist of whom no one has heard mentioned since. Another theory is that he learned of Egyptian Freemasonry from a man called Ananiah, a merchant from Jutland. So, those are interesting facts. It talks about some other potential origins from the Martinez Pascali had founded a Masonic rite in 1754, which included as its seventh degree that of Rose Croix. The rituals were of a magical or theurgic nature and involved communication with spirits. So the rite of Cagliostro was... There's a guy who states in a book that Cagliostro's rite is actually that of Pascali, and as evidenced by his complete ritual, which it is so closely follows the theurgy of Pascali that it need leave no doubt as to whence Cagliostro derived his system, and as he stated himself, that it was founded on the manuscript of a George Coston. So his rite of Freemasonry may have come from this guy known as Pascali, Pasqually. This guy had founded a Masonic rite in 1754, which included as its seventh degree that of Rose Croix. I just read that. The rituals were of a magical or theurgic nature and involved communication with spirits. The system of magic dates back to the time of the ancient Egyptians, albeit fragmented and modified over the centuries by the Chaldeans. I don't know if it's Chaldeans or Chaldeans, Greeks, and Romans. Egypt was revered to have been the seat of esoteric wisdom and had been visited by all manner of philosophers and seekers. Amongst them was Homer and Plato. These mysteries had been firmly implanted within the early Christian church before the tyranny and fear-driven dogma of the Holy Fathers took hold. So yeah, early Christianity was actually much more genuine in its nature. Cagliostro would weave his form of Christianity into the occult sciences of the ancients, encompassing the birth, death, and rebirth myths of both religions. Isis, Osiris, Hiram Abiff, and Christ made comfortable stablemates in Cagliostro's world. And the prophets and mystics Moses, Elijah, and Enoch nestled in happily amongst them. It was a concept that many Christian occultists had nurtured, and they had also been sorely punished for their heresy in this way. So, yeah, Freemasonry in and of itself is kind of a mashing up of different mystical traditions, like Egyptian and Christian, very heavily, the narrative is based around Christianity and the building of King Solomon's temple, that's not purely Christian either. I think in Islam they talk about King Solomon and, you know, other traditions as well. But what Cagliostro did is he took the Egyptian, kind of the Book of the Dead type teachings and all of these Egyptian influences and used Christian symbology instead. So that way, I think the teachings were more concealed. If they ever were to be found, they wouldn't be able to be condemned as much, because instead of using the Egyptian deities, they still use archangels. they use all the Christian symbolism instead of the Egyptian symbolism. So even though the core of the rituals are Egyptian in nature, they very much follow a lot of the old Book of the Dead type stuff. It's not using the Egyptian deities, it's using Christian symbology. So it's using like archangels and things of that nature. So let's try and get through some more of this. Alchemical rejuvenation and the return to Eden. Second paragraph explains magical practices involved. So this is page 176. His desire to help humanity to reach its pinnacle of purity and goodness spurred him on to embrace the ancient Egyptian concept of the immortality of the soul, the resurgence of the dead. He believed that man could dissolve his negative qualities and become pure, as humans had been before the fall of man, quote. He was offering a Garden of Eden to humankind, or to those that had the discipline and temerity to apply themselves to the rigorous training involved. The, quote, old man could become new through moral, physical, and spiritual regeneration. And this idea exists very much just within magic itself, like within ceremonial magic. There is this idea that you can, in a sense, immortalize yourself, but to do that, you really have to shed away a lot of the things that people are not willing to let go of. And we live in a fast-paced culture. We live in a culture that's really where everyone is just draining their vital energy and they're killing themselves. Like, essentially, that's really what's going on in the toxic, poisonous world of today. But they're meant to have that free will to do that. You know, it's not, no one's really supposed to interfere with free will. People can be offered the teachings. You know, what is the quote, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink. It's kind of that sort of thing. So as real magicians, you know, people who really study this stuff have kind of the keys to immortality in a sense. It is very possible to like reverse the aging process, the physical aging process, through certain practices and stuff like that. I do really believe that that is the case. It takes a very high level of mastery and self-control and discipline to get to that space, though, where you're actually like really doing that. And even so, the physical body is only going to be able to handle so much. So our spirits are already immortal anyway. So I think, in a sense, I get where people are coming from to just reverse the aging process and go back into the light and go back to source. But at the same time, there's a lot to be experienced here on Earth, and we're meant to embrace physicality. We're meant to embrace the physical things of this world too. So I think it's always a balance between these two things. And as far as the Garden of Eden, I think I'm going to do a whole separate video on that. I don't know if I'll do that today. I might have time to do a video, but if not, I will be doing that hopefully in the near future. Kind of just my views on Eden and what it was, and why mankind fell and why it was necessary that mankind fell. Really the whole free will, going back to that whole free will thing. People have to be allowed to make mistakes. You know, and I've learned more probably through my mistakes that I've made in my life than I have through the other things. So mistakes happen for a reason. Sometimes they're not even really mistakes. It's just we had to walk that path so we could learn the hard way. So sometimes you have to learn through actually doing it. You can't just be told something and then obey. Like, you have to actually know what it's like to go through that harsh experience. The wisdom of the Egyptian priests would be supplanted in the temple of Cagliostro. 3 vitally important magical practices would be the basis for his regeneration of mankind. Firstly, the convocation of spirits. Secondly, the practice of moral, physical, and spiritual regeneration. And finally, the use of divination by means of the medium or dove. Remember the dove being the small child who was able to scry or have the psychic vision, to interpret images sent from the divine. His system of Egyptian Freemasonry would take the Mason from the mundane to the sublime, from purely speculative to positively transcendental. Because, yeah, oftentimes as modern Masons, we like to speculate on these things. We like to think about them. But to actually walk the path, to actually live that spiritual lifestyle, it's not for everyone. And there was a point in my life where I reached a crossroads where it was like, man, do I just want to like go and hide myself away somewhere and kind of become almost like a monk and just try to do this whole, you know, like avoid all temptations sort of thing, and just, you know, live that kind of way and live like a hermit or a shaman away from society. I feel like I definitely had the means to do that at one point. I could have just escaped the society and gone into hiding and all those things, but I think this is much more beneficial for me to do, you know, this YouTube channel. I embrace a lot of the things of the physical world that maybe some spiritual people would say, oh, that's evil or that's bad. You know, it's only going to corrupt you. But I feel like in that sort of way, as I'm getting to know myself more in the physical world and through spiritual practices, I'm bringing the two worlds together. It's the as above, so below. So I think spirituality can definitely be taken to a certain extremism where that's not really the person's dharma in life. They're trying to shed away all their ego. They're trying to shed away all of their, you know, maybe unhealthy habits or whatever. But they're doing it at the cost of like not really fulfilling the purpose of what they came here to do. Maybe they have a real life's mission, which really does involve getting involved in the politics and maybe they're meant to change something. Maybe they're meant to be like, for me, you know, I like music too. There's things in physical existence which are definitely worth experiencing. So it's always this kind of weird way of trying to balance a spiritual life, a quiet spiritual life, and then also be involved in the world too and make actual life changes, you know. So Grand Copt, as we said before, was the title of Cagliostro. The Pentagon is mentioned, and this, of course, has an allusion to the pentagram and the pentagon are going to be highly, highly connected. Okay, so this... Oh, interesting side note, too. I definitely wanted to mention this. Aleister Crowley believed that Cagliostro was one of his prior incarnations. That's very interesting. So, yeah. And there's actually a DC character, the comic books. Cagliostro makes it into one of those comic books. I forget which series it is, but he's like an immortal in the comics. So his the person of Cagliostro, it's been so popular in even like pop culture and stuff, to make it into a DC comic. I think it was it would have been like in the 60s maybe or something like that. It's an older volume, but I did find that to be really interesting as well. It would be weird if Crowley, one of his prior incarnations was, Crowley's previous incarnations was Cagliostro, because Cagliostro is definitely much more right-hand path and about purity and innocence, where as Crowley, while he was a powerful magician, he didn't end up so well in the end, at least not in the physical realm, and he did a lot of experimental stuff. I think his dharma or his life purpose or his will was to really make magic known to the public again, which he did very successfully, and made it so that magic would be relevant again for another, 100 years or whatever. I just heard that in a podcast somewhere or an interview. Also, go and check out R.C. Frater YouTube channel. He has some really interesting interviews on there. Some really smart people. Some really intelligent cats when it comes to like magic and all these different esoteric subjects. So R.C. Frater, make sure you go and check out his YouTube channel. Love his stuff. Really, really interesting talks, especially the one with P.D. Newman and the whole DMT. And I think Cagliostro's rituals, they do talk about taking a certain substance at some point. There's always this elixir, the elixir. And I think a lot of the times the elixirs is a psychedelic component, which allows them to have these visions. And if you add on top of that the fact that they've been you know, people in these secret societies, they've been on like the right diets, they've been avoiding the temptations of life, so they're in a state of really like physical purity. So when they do take these substances, they're probably having very, very profound experiences because they're already in touch with their senses, they're already in touch with their bodies, their emotions, their nervous system. So when you do take that drink, it's going to be a lot more of a, I don't want to say spectacle, but it's going to be a much deeper, much more profound, that's the word I was looking for, a much more profound experience than the average person who decides to, you know, partake in those sorts of things. And that's what we see a lot of today with like the new age and stuff. It's like a lot of people just, they get so caught up in the, like the psychedelics and stuff that becomes almost like a band-aid, or like, it's like they can't have a spiritual experience without having to take a substance, which is really sad. I think those things should be like kind of the cherry on top. You know, if you're gonna indulge in those sorts of things, like do it in the correct spiritual way and do it with a sacred purpose in mind. Do it with intention. Just have a real purpose for why you're doing it. Don't just like run out and go do it and with a bunch of people who have no, you know, they don't have any control over their energies. They don't know how the energies are channeling through them and actually possessing them. A lot of people, they have no idea about that stuff, and they just go out and get involved in all these kinds of different things, and it can really lead to the downfall of somebody if they don't know how to reconcile the energies within themselves, and they get trapped in that kind of that's a whole different subject, so I'm not going to get into that right now, but anyway, so I thought this part was very interesting about Adam, Enoch, and Elijah actually being like the three hidden masters of Egyptian Freemasonry. Let's read this part real quick. Egyptian Freemasonry began as a fledgling order in 1779 while the Cagliostros were touring Courland. And I forgot to mention, I didn't go over this part earlier in the book. Cagliostro has a wife, and she does all this spiritual work with him, which I think is really cool. And she actually had her own branch of Masonry, which was for females too. In the Egyptian Freemasonry, men and women could be admitted. And she kind of ran the female side of it. And Cagliostro ran the male side. So that's really cool. And we'll get into that in a little bit. This video's actually gone on so long though. It's an hour and 7 minutes, and I've still got a little bit of stuff I want to cover. I guess I'm just gonna make it all one video though. I don't know that I really want to split this into two different videos or not. But it is gonna take a while to upload this one. I do know that longer videos take a lot longer to upload on my phone. Sometimes it can take up to 45 minutes, you know, or something like that. So I'm just going to keep on trucking there. Egyptian Freemasonry began as a fledgling order in 1779. So yeah, this is like the late 1700s, where people are still getting persecuted for having more spiritually oriented beliefs rather than religious ones. While the Cagliostros were touring Courland, and his wife's name was Seraphina. I think that's a really cool name. If I would have had a daughter, that was actually one of the names that I was looking at to name her, would have been Seraphina, because it has the seraphim, you know, reference to the seraphim within that name, and the seraphim are actually the highest order of angels, which, you know, go there encircling the throne of God, and they're kind of like hiding their face because his glory is so bright and all those things. So take that allegory however you want to, but yeah, those are experiences you're gonna have to experience if you want to tune into those energies and stuff. Those are things you'll have to experience for yourself. Egyptian Freemasonry began as a fledgling order in 1779 while the Cagliostros were touring Courland. Cagliostro took up the title Grand Cop, a name originally used by the High Priest of Egypt, and cast himself as founder and initiator of the rite. He offered the candidate the teachings to achieve perfection by moral and physical rejuvenation, we talked about that a lot before, and to endow them with the pentagon, or the pentagram. So this really brings into, you know, and the banishing, or not just the banishing, but the pentagram rituals in general, and working with angels. It's all very reminiscent of the same sort of thing. Some people, even Crowley, said the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, is the Philosopher's Stone itself. There is something really deep to that, and one who has worked with these forces for a long enough time, you start to know, you have such profound experiences that you'll know once you do it, and you start working on that stuff. Achieve moral perfection by moral and physical rejuvenation, and to endow them with the pentagon, which he believed would confer on them a state of restoration to primitive innocence, which had been forfeited by Adam during the fall. Cagliostro maintained that Egyptian Freemasonry originated with Adam, Enoch, and Elijah, who taught the divine mysteries. He believed that Adam, Enoch, and Elijah were the founders of Egyptian Freemasonry. Egyptian Genesis, more in line with the Gnostic idea that man can become divine. So the Egyptian Genesis versus the church. Let's read that a little bit. The first man created by God, there's a correlation between the Christian creation and the Egyptian creation, often referred to as the Mosaic Genesis and the Egyptian Genesis. In the Christian version, Adam is made by God in his own image, but he is not regarded as a divine being. Therefore, the Christians believe there is only one divine being or Son of God, Jesus, and no other human can rise to the inner divinity as shown by Christ. See, that's where I really disagree with the church, because I believe that everybody has that same capability. Everyone has that same divine spark or potential within them. Jesus is just kind of the one that did it. And after reading the Law of One, I think that Jesus was just one of the prototypes. He wasn't the only one. He was one of the prototypes. He was a higher dimensional being. I don't know if he was fourth or fifth density, or maybe higher density. It came down to the physical to play that part, so to speak. So, yeah, people can get caught up in whatever beliefs they want to, but no hate here, just trying to show you different sides of things. Conversely, within the Egyptian Genesis, man is a divine being at one with the Creator and capable of becoming divinely immortal. Enoch was a direct descendant of Adam. We know about Enoch from the Book of Enoch. He was the great-grandfather of Noah, reputed to have lived for 365 years, which is interesting because that's the length of our year. He transcended to heaven. He was there thought to have been appointed guardian of all the celestial treasure, chief of archangels, of course becoming Metatron. It is said that he became the archangel Metatron, which is the highest, quote unquote, the highest archangel. Because he's the archangel of Kether, but they all play just as important roles, I think. I think Archangel Raziel is actually one of the most esoteric and profound of the archangels, even more so than Metatron. I think Metatron's all about unity, and Raziel is really about divine wisdom. It's the Hokmah, so it's a really important piece. Like I said, they all play a different role. So Enoch was thought to have been appointed guardian of all the celestial treasure, chief of archangels, and the immediate attendant at God's side. He taught all secrets, commanded the angels to do his bidding, and carried out the wishes of the Creator. He is believed to have written 3 apocryphal books: the Book of Enoch, which holds the secrets of magic and immortality, often referred to as the angel Metatron, as we just said, identified with Idris in the Quran, and the ancient Greeks believed him to be Hermes Trismegistus. So some people think Enoch and Hermes are one and the same, or Thoth, due to being the messenger of God and the conductor of souls to heaven. And then we have Elijah, which is the third founder of Egyptian Freemasonry, as believed by Cagliostro? He was the 9th century prophet in Israel who appears in the Hebrew Bible, Talmud, Christian Bible, and the Quran. According to the Book of Kings, Elijah was able to raise the dead. He could bring forth fire from the sky, and he ascended to heaven on a whirlwind when his work was done on earth. Frequently compared with Jesus and John the Baptist, and is expected to return to earth before the second coming, Elijah is linked to the archangel Sandalphon, or Sandalphon. Sandalphon, I've heard it pronounced that way too. I usually say Sandalphon. So that's, the relationship between Metatron and Sandalphon is a very interesting one. And I've talked about that in some videos before. Metatron having the more, what do I want to say? The influences from above, and Sandalphon working more on the material plane in Mount Qliphoth. This section is really interesting. We can now see how Cagliostro came to evolve his own system of Freemasonry. Some fragments of lectures given by Cagliostro regarding Egyptian Freemasonry were written down by Elisa von der Recke, R-E-C-K-E, Cagliostro's former pupil in 1779, and they expound further on his beliefs. That sounds like a woman's name, Elisa? Huh. So she must have been in the female part of the Freemasonry. Moses, Elijah, and Christ are the three chief presiding beings over the earthly globe, and the most perfect Freemasons that have existed up until now. That is really interesting. So there's these quote-unquote 3 grand masters. Moses, Elijah, and Christ. Very interesting. Or the chiefs, they're the 3 hidden chiefs. Although after successfully attaining their glorious goal here, they have been wafted to higher spheres, and there exert their powers and wisdom for the happiness of beings of higher kinds. And although they have now already increased the immeasurable ocean of the creation by fresh worlds, which they bring forth to the glory of the author of all things. So they create new worlds all the time. This is very interesting stuff. Their influence on this globe and their care for us still endure, and each one of them has here his own invisible community, which, however, all meet together at one chief point and work against the principle of evil through various channels. So still very much this idea of good versus evil going on here, though. We see that a lot. Freemasonry is the school in which those who are educated are destined for sacred mysticism, but the lower orders of Freemasons reckon nothing of these matters, and their attention is diverted into various channels in order that their secret superiors can watch them better and can make the worthiest among them for higher purposes. A stricter selection of these members is made by the 3 presiding beings of our globe. These subordinates of Moses, Elijah, and Christ are the secret superiors of the Freemasons. Cagliostro is one of Elijah's subordinates. It's interesting. So he's kind of under Elijah's care or under Elijah's watch. He has already attained the 3rd grade. Elijah's disciples never die unless they become perverts to black magic, and will, after completing well on their earthly career, be translated to heaven, as was their lofty teacher. But before they reach the number 12, they are sometimes purged by an apparent death, but so to speak always rise again from their own ashes. In this way, the phoenix represents the allegory of these beneficent magicians. The first class of the adherents of Elijah is chosen from the nursery of the Freemasons. So there's this always this idea of hidden masters watching over everything. We hear this with Madame Blavatsky all the time. The first class of the adherents of Elijah is chosen from the nursery of the Freemasons. These disciples number 72. We know 72 is very important in, what is that operation? The Shem operation, when you invoke all those archangels. There's 72 angels and there's 72 corresponding demons as well. These disciples number 72, and they have a specific which rejuvenates and preserves the balance of all the forces of nature, so that they often attain the age of Methuselah. Methuselah was the oldest known person in the Bible. How old was he? He lived 969 years, so the first class of adherents. So these disciples number 72, and they have a specific which rejuvenates and preserves the balance of all the forces of nature. I don't know what they mean, what he means by they have a specific. Interesting. So that they attain this age. So there's these 72 hidden disciples that reach this like really long age, really just from probably being tucked away in a secret place and having access to really good food and probably some different substances which are allowing them to live that long, keeping the right state of consciousness, all these sorts of things. But they must not impart this specific to anyone without the knowledge of their superiors. So it's always about blindly obeying the superiors in this Egyptian school of Freemasonry, which I find is really interesting. The second degree is gradually selected from these and consists of 49 members. So there's 72, and then there's 49. The latter possess the secret of the red powder. The red powder, according to P.D. Newman's work, is DMT. Very interesting. And if you want to watch his podcast with R.C. Frater, or Frater R.C., very good interview. That is a highly recommended interview to go and check out if you're into this sort of thing. Definitely. The latter possesses the secret of the red powder, or to state the matter more clearly, they possess the means of bringing all metals to the maturity of gold. It's the prima materia. It's supposed to be the original material, which all the alchemists are looking for. They also have the power of communicating to their superiors in one moment at a distance of more than 100 miles, anything they may consider necessary, through like telepathy. Madame Blavatsky also says that some of them can they can write something and then they can stare at it and read it, and they can send that letter telepathically to another initiate, which is very interesting. From these 49, the 35 are chosen. So then the next class is 35. According to what Cagliostro told us, he had already reached this height, and from these the 24 are chosen. These two degrees are the most dangerous, as all evil spirits attack these members of magic in order to lure them from the principle of good. He who, however, attains the fifth and last grade will grow in perfection to all eternity. So it seems like once you've reached this certain hump or whatever, then you're kind of clear from then on. But I think there are a lot of people who they want to transcend, they want to rise to these, it sounds good to do this thing, to get to that level, but it's very tough. And a lot of people think they can actually overcome all the temptations that come with earthly existence and kind of we'll call it the darker forces or the darker archetypes and energies. It takes a really special person, I think, who's been through a lot of experiences in prior incarnations to eventually overcome those things. And like I said before, I don't think those things should all be bypassed. I think those things are meant to be experienced. And then a soul will come into an incarnation where they know that this is their life's work. This is what they're here to do. It's what they're meant to do, is to work on this sort of thing and to transcend themselves. But there's a time and a place for that, and it's not meant for everyone. Not everyone's meant to ascend, and become part of the secret council that watches over everyone. It takes an extraordinary amount of mastery and secrecy for all of these things to take place. So it's very elect. It's a very select few. And those who are at that level, they obviously know by that point, like, hey, this is our true will. This is really what we came here to do. This last earthly degree comprises 12 members only. So the last group is only 12 members, which of course is, emblematic of the 12 zodiac or the 12 disciples. There's lots of different 12, symbolism with the number 12. Now the great moment has arrived, as one of these 12 will, like Elijah, be wafted to higher regions, or, ascend to higher regions to work in other worlds, and therefore the most deserving members of the 4 grades are to be advanced. So once that spot's open, there's a vacancy there, and then somebody from the lower grade can go to the next grade, etc. So it's as these hidden masters ascend, then somebody has to go in and replace the members that are moving up, so to speak. Should we hear sometime after that he is dead, and then again that he is still alive, we can be assured that he has withstood the temptations of the evil spirits and has ascended to the 4th degree. He amongst us who is the most faithful and righteous, and whose soul is devoted to magic only for good aims, be it man or woman, has the prospect of being raised to the 72 as soon as the first vacancy occurs. Interesting, here it says too, the Queen of Sheba, whose story in the Old Testament is completely veiled in magical pictures and is only partially represented. I think it's a really brief story. I looked into the story a little bit, and I think she ends up bringing a bunch of gifts for King Solomon, and her and King Solomon had really deep esoteric discussions, and there may have even been an affair between the Queen of Sheba and Solomon. We don't really know for sure. But knowing the nature of Solomon and how many wives he had, I wouldn't doubt it, So yeah, she is only partially represented in the story, and the Queen of Sheba would have attained the highest grade of magic which a female soul has ever reached, but at the end she became too weak to withstand the temptations of the evil spirits, and therefore her story, which is only intelligible to true magicians, has been related in the story of Calypso. I tried to look into the mythology of Calypso a little bit too, and I don't remember too much. I only read a little bit. Solomon, the building of whose temple is an allegorical picture in certain societies, strayed from the path of virtue in his magical career, but was again saved and snatched from the principle of evil. The story of the fall of the angels is only an allegory of the transition from white to black magic. Very interesting. So the story of the fallen angels, it's really the story about us. Where are you at in your spiritual journey? Have you ascended so much to a point that there has been a fall in your own personal life, your own spiritual journey, where the temptations of certain things start to come in, and really they should be looked into. They shouldn't just be bypassed. It's we need to understand the darkness that exists within ourselves. We don't always need to banish it and hide away from it. These darker aspects need to be understood and integrated. I think so. Otherwise, we're not embracing the whole totality of who we are. So all of these stories are things to help us understand. They're allegories and lessons to help us understand our own existence. Interesting thing here too, the divine doctrines of the Greeks, the Zendavesta, the Eddas, and the Bible are all books sacred to magic. The circle and the triangle are sacred magical ciphers. 3 and 9, 2 and 7 are holy numbers. He who grasps the power of these numbers and ciphers is near the source of virtue. Very interesting. The word Jehovah contains 3 in it twice over and possesses immeasurable power. Jehovah and Yahweh are like some of the social memory complexes that a lot of these secret societies, especially Masonic, were trying to get in contact with. And as we know, Yahweh isn't he's not a malevolent being. He doesn't have bad intentions, but there was a mistake that was made, and they talk about that heavily in the Law of One. So if you want to learn more about that, I recommend you go and check out the Law of One. This was interesting too. Just as there are sacred numbers, so are there holy letters. The letters IHS should never be contemplated without the deepest awe, as they contain all wisdom and the fount of all bliss. He who grasps the true value of these letters is close to the eternal source of all good. There are 3 missing chapters from the Bible, and these are only in the hands of magicians. He who possesses one of these chapters can command supernatural powers. He who does not venerate IHS, the sun, the circle, and the triangle, 2 and 7, 3 and 9, and the word Jehovah, and has not attained true knowledge of these letters, numbers, and words will not possess the missing chapters of the Bible. These contain the highest wisdom by which the world is governed. Very interesting. All right, so I'm on page 180 right now, and we've gone for about an hour and a half. So I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this video for now. I do want to do a second part to this video where we actually kind of go into the Egyptian ritual itself. I didn't quite get to that point yet, but there were a lot of other interesting things that I wanted to cover in this video. So I'm sorry that this video got kind of stretched out. It is really long, but there's so much to cover about this guy. So chapter 9, I was just reading some things from chapter 8, but chapter 9 is where we actually get the ritual of Egyptian Freemasonry, and I will get into that in the next video. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and take a break because I think my voice could use a break for a couple minutes. We'll see if I decide to end up doing another video or not. May not. So alrighty, everyone, just hit 131.33. That was cool. Thank you everyone for watching and for tuning into these videos. It really means a lot. I hope you get some kind of value from these videos, from watching them. If you like the content, please subscribe, ring the notification bell to be notified of new videos, and I think that pretty much covers it for now. So alright everyone, peace and blessings, and until next time, I will see you then.